Hi, my name is Senga Lindsay. I'm a landscape architect here in North Vancouver. We're standing here in early April on top of our edible green roof. We've got a couple of exciting things that we want to show you that are happening on our roof this early spring. The first one is we're in the midst of setting up our new beehives. And later on today we're going to take you over to Honeyland and actually show demonstrations on how you actually hive. They call it beehiving, or hiving your bees, introducing them to their new home. And before we begin, I'd just like to follow up with some equipment that is very important as a home apiarist, and that is some vital pieces of equipment that you're going to need. Number one, the all-important smoker, and this helps to calm the bees, which we'll later on show you how that works. The next piece of equipment you need is an apiary suit, for obvious reasons, to protect oneself against bee stings, because the bees can get a little upset when you are working around them, plus a set of heavy-duty gloves for the same reason. And then we also have a couple of other tools, a brush to brush bees off the hives and to brush them into the hives, as well as a hive tool. And the hive tool is important for manipulating what we call the frames inside the supers. So here on our edible green roof we have set up two beehives. And the first thing to note about placement of your hives is you always want to make sure that the bees are in a position where they'll get warmed up in the early morning. And our hives here are actually pointed east, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that your hives start to warm up early in the morning. Bees tend to go very dormant when it gets cold or rainy or wet. So by having their hives located where the sun rises in the east, you start to warm up the bees, and then they start to activate and forage very quickly early in the morning. So our hive entrances are on this side and this side, respectively. We've also offset the two hives so that the bees won't become confused as to what their actual home is. We will have one queen in each hive, and so by offsetting them, the bees will be able to locate their proper home. Now, although we have a fully set up hive here, when we first start to introduce our new bees to their new home, we're actually going to break it down. And I'll show you how that works. And here I have broken down the beehive into its basic component, just so you can see how it works. This is basically the finished product that you would see at the end of August with your brood chambers below and what they call the honey supers, where you actually collect the honey from later on this year. This here is the initial stages of starting your new beehive. It starts out with what we call the bottom board, and I'll pull off the chamber to show you. This bottom board here keeps the hive nice and dry. It also has, you can see, a little slot here, and the bees actually go in, they land on the board, they go in and up into what we call the brood chamber. And this here is the brood chamber. And I pulled out a few frames for you to see exactly what these look like. What happens is we've got a wood frame with a plastic, what they call foundation. And you can see the previous residents that used to live in this hive have already built up the honeycomb. They've now left the hive, and we're going to reintroduce our new bees into this. Our new bees will in turn take the honeycomb, clean out all the old debris, and set up house. And this is where the queen will actually lay her eggs and start to raise young. As you can see, there's a series of frames in here, and it's very important that they are a specific size, and they have what you call the bee space, which is these two little tags here which actually space the frames properly and allow the honeycomb to be drawn out and allow the bees to pass in between the frames. And a typical brood chamber has 10 frames with appropriate sized foundations and the bee space in between. Once you put your frames in place, and we'll show you that later on, then we have what we call a top board. And the top board, in essence, allows some air passage to go under the roof, this is the roof. This one is actually a feeder board, and what happens here is we will be putting in sugar and feed for our new bees, because when they come, and our bees are coming from New Zealand today, they'll be quite hungry, and being in early April, we won't have the kind of food supply readily available for them. So what we're going to do when we hive our bees is we're going to fill up this feeder board, and we're also going to give them some sugar water at the same time. So once you put on your top board, that's it. You put on the roof, keeps the hive nice and dry and warm and clean, and this is how you begin your hive and introduce your bees. Later on this summer, just as a quick note, we will be adding what we call the honey supers. And here's the example of, again, some honey supers. They're shortened frames, as you can see. This has all been honeycombed. The honeycomb's been made by the previous residents as well. And this is where the bees will start to store the honey for the winter time. So in essence, what they're doing is they're storing the food in order to keep themselves and their young alive all winter time. And this is in August. September is when we'll actually be able to harvest some of this excess honey. We'll still leave the bees some, but typically you could get about 90 to 100 pounds of honey off of a typical hive system such as this one.